On this episode of Technicolor Blood, we are going to discuss Bohemian Rhapsody, Bryan Singer's new movie starring Rami Malek. Terrence, are you excited about that one?
Oh, I'm super excited to talk about it.
All right.
We are the champions.
We are the champions. We're going to talk about this at length coming up right now on Technicolor Blood. Technicolor Blood, we are back again, and we're going to talk about Bohemian Rhapsody. We saw this movie together a couple of nights ago, and we're both real excited to talk about it. Terrence, should we just start off with some general thoughts?
Sure. Bohemian Rhapsody is directed by Bryan Singer. Most people probably know him from directing all but one of the many X-Men movies that have come out. He's directed some other stuff, but that has had varying levels of quality attached to it.
Superman Returns.
Yeah. That Jack the Giant Killer a few years ago, he was responsible for inflicting upon us. So he's one of those directors that X-Men is his thing. That's kind of his jam. That's where he really excels. And the stuff that is not X-Men is hit or miss at best. This is obviously not an X-Men movie.
All right.
So what are your thoughts on how good it was?
Well, a big Queen fan, and I have to say, if you're a big Queen fan, I highly recommend this movie. The movie is really more of a celebration of the music than anything else. At least that's how I came away from it. I've seen some of the criticism for the movie, and we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
But and it's not all entirely untrue. But I think some people might be kind of missing the point of the movie that they were trying to make. I really enjoyed it. The musical scenes were epic. Rami Malek was as amazing as you thought he was going to be when you saw him in the trailer.
I had no reason to expect him to be amazing. I don't watch Mr. Robot, so I'm wholly unfamiliar with him as an actor for the most part. But of course, when I saw him for the first time in costume and in character as Freddie Mercury, I was taken aback at how accurate his physical depiction of that character was. So I was pleasantly blown away by his performance, which is really strong.
Yeah. He's a lock to get nominated for Best Actor.
It has to be.
That's absolutely going to happen. And he did the character justice. I don't know all the ins and outs and all the salacious details of Freddie Mercury's life. I just sort of know stuff on the surface that you just know being a fan of a band without delving too much deeper into it. I think you probably know a little bit more than I do on that end, and a little bit more about the band. But I mean, the point of the movie, I think, was the music. Yes. And they do obviously tackle Freddie Mercury's issues and the things that led to his untimely death, and all of that stuff is in there. But the movie really was about the music, and I think they did a good job of touching on some of the other elements, but focusing on the music. And they did a thing in the movie that I was very happy to see, because there's been other movies that featured a lot of music that it always annoys me that they don't actually let the music play out enough. And in this movie, they let the songs breathe. They let the music breathe, and they played long, uninterrupted, entire songs at times.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
And that had to happen, and I was so hoping it would happen. And so I have to say that for a movie that I wouldn't say that I had a ton of expectations. I was just excited to see it. I went in thinking, okay, this is going to be fun. It's going to be sort of like one of those sing-along things. We're going to get some epic crowd shot stuff, obviously from the trailer.
Right.
And I have to say that the movie delivered everything that the trailer promised.
Absolutely. I would agree with that 100%. Yeah. And I think you kind of nailed the nail right on the head. It very much is a film about Queen. It's not a film about Freddie Mercury. Now, he's definitely the main character and everything revolves around him, but that's just the nature of the band Queen.
Right.
But you get a lot of the beginnings of the band. You get the contributions of the other members of the band. It's all kind of told along the framework of Freddie Mercury's life, but it's very much, like you said, it's very much about the music.
Yeah.
And that that makes it so if you're wondering, is this a tearjerker of a movie? I would say not. I would say you walk out feeling really good, feeling very triumphant.
Yeah.
Now, is that a bit of a cheat? You could certainly put in that argument, but I think it all just boils down to what kind of film the filmmakers were trying to make. And they very clearly and deliberately did not want to make it, a gritty biopic drama about Freddie Mercury. They wanted to make a movie that celebrated him and celebrated the band.
Right.
And they were 100% successful in that.
Yeah. And I guess we should also lay out, there will be spoilers throughout this. I mean, I know it's a historical, you can read up, everyone knows what happened with Freddie Mercury, but just FYI, if you haven't seen the movie and are not super familiar with Queen, you may want to avoid that. I don't know, but we're just going to speak openly about this movie as we go along. So yeah, I think some of the blowback on it has been, we were talking about how folks were upset that they maybe didn't delve enough into his gay lifestyle. Like they might have sugarcoated it a little bit. That it was one of those things where, he wasn't actually, he was bisexual maybe at the beginning, but he actually was gay.
Yeah.
And that they didn't really, it seemed like they were the movie was maybe too embarrassed or something to go too far with that. But, there's some valid criticisms there, but the kind of movie that I think a lot of the critics are complaining about, there's room for a movie like that, but it wasn't this movie. This movie couldn't be both of those things. I think unless you're going to make a 5-hour movie, where you want to have a lot of the songs represented, you want to have those awesome scenes where they sort of show the birth of some of the songs in the studio, the long play out of some of the live performances, and then also have all that drama. I mean, you could do it. It would be really, really long, but I just feel like those are two totally different movies with two totally different tones.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it was the movie that I hoped it would be. And sure, I would watch the other movie too if they made it.
Absolutely.
But I'm very glad that this was the movie, because I feel like even though Queen's a legendary rock band, I kind of feel like they're sort of underrated in the grand scope of when people talk about all-time great rock bands. You always hear the same names, Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and Black Sabbath even, and some of those. And I just feel like Queen sort of belongs in that category. And they don't, not that they're super underrated, but I feel like they're a tier above where a lot of people place them. Right.
Yeah. I think you're probably right about that. And I think you were right too when you were saying that, there's room for that other movie, but this was, a more positive, upbeat film. And I think because of that, it'll have legs that the other version wouldn't. I think if you're going to tell just the Freddie Mercury biopic, that's obviously a movie that might chase down Oscars and awards. But I don't know how much that carries on into, it lasting past its initial release. With this film, I could totally see this being a film that in the right places could become a staple of like midnight shows where, an audience gets together and they sing along to the movie and, they chant along to We Will Rock You and all the rest of it. It's very much a celebration of the music. I can't think of another rock biopic that has included as many songs as this one does. Yeah. The soundtrack to this movie is the greatest hits of Queen. Right. It's all of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even towards the end and in the closing credits, when you're thinking, well, what about this song? What about this song? It's like they were in the brains of people who were big Queen fans thinking, well, you played all the really big hits, but these ones that are like sort of on the next level, you're not really, there it is. Yeah. Well, what about, there it is. I love that. Like we were sort of on the same wavelength with the filmmakers there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even to the point where there's representation of songs that maybe, don't get a featured place in the film, they're still, you hear a snippet of it at some point in the movie, just as a reminder that wink, yeah, we got this one too.
Right.
Wink, we got this one also. I really like that. It's almost like a musical Easter egg hidden in the movie along the way.
I love and this has been in other movies before as well, but I love the scene of the birth of a song. They did that a lot. And I'm sure a lot of it was overly dramatized. I'm sure maybe none of them went the way that it said it went, but I thought they did a great job of that excitement where everyone in the theater knows this song, everyone in the theater is waiting for this song. And instead of just like, they're going to play the song, they give you the sort of the birth of the song. Like I love the way they wove the piano melody from Bohemian Rhapsody from the beginning of the movie, and it's just sort of rattling around in Freddie's head. They go out to record A Night at the Opera in that like farmhouse way in the countryside, and he's like looking outside, he's looking at the clouds, he's looking at the trees, and that melody starts going through his head again, and then bam, straight into the studio.
Yes.
I really like stuff like that, especially for music that I love. And I mean, we could easily U-turn this entire episode into a discussion about Queen itself, just the band, which is not what we're trying to do. But it's kind of hard. You can't separate the two.
Yeah.
And this is a band that it's one of the, I didn't know I needed this movie until I saw the trailer. Yeah. And then until we saw it finally, I was so looking forward to this movie. They delayed it. It was supposed to come out, I think, in August originally. And I guess it probably got some Oscar buzz because of how people reacted to Rami Malek. Yeah. So they pushed it out a little bit. And I've just been so looking forward to it. And we saw it. And like I said, I think the trailer delivered everything that was promised. And, I spent a lot of that movie with goosebumps because there were just so many scenes that just connected with me. Like I said, I love those like in the studio birth of a song kind of scenes. The whole Wembley Stadium thing at the end was
for Live Aid.
Yeah. The super famous appearance for Queen at that concert. I mean, they nailed that so much. I don't know if you did this, but we, of course, after the movie, we went home and we watched the Live Aid performance.
Oh, did you? Yeah, I didn't think
YouTube.
to do that. Yeah.
Oh my God. Couldn't be more dead on. Nice. Accurate. They clearly spent hours and hours and days, months researching every little piece of that, to the wardrobe, to the props,
the choreography of the movements of the entire band. Like they're all doing what they do, right?
And here's okay, specifically on the and this really is, I think, a window into Queen, specifically on the Wembley Stadium segment of the movie. This is a massive crowd of 100,000 plus people in this stadium. And they show throughout the movie, in the movie, they show all those people super into it. Every beat, everyone's into it, from the front of the stadium to the back of the stadium. 100,000 people. People that are literally a tenth of a mile away in the back of the stadium are as into it as the people at the front. That's in the movie. And when I'm watching that, of course, my skeptical mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm sure it wasn't bedlam like this.
Right.
We watched the show on YouTube, and I mean, literally, that entire place was in the palm of that band's hand.
Right.
The entire show. Every person from the front to the back of that 100,000 plus stadium was pumping their fists, raising their arms in unison that entire show in real life. And that just blew me away because I remember the performance, but I haven't seen it since the 80s.
Right.
And I never revisited it. And it was, they literally did not exaggerate anything in the movie.
Yeah. So I would say my knowledge of Queen is enough to, I might not know enough to get what the filmmakers got wrong, but I recognized a lot of the stuff that they got right. And one of my favorite things about it ties back into what you were saying about how fun it is to see, the birth of a song. I loved how much this movie really wanted to constantly remind people that creatively Queen is more than just Freddie Mercury. Yeah. It's all four guys. They were, all of them were writers, and the hits were spread out over the entire four guys. And so, you get that, you get moments in the film where they've written little pieces of dialogue to constantly reinforce that, to keep reminding the audience that, somebody else wrote this song, or somebody else made this decision, or it wasn't just Freddie driving this ship. And I really like that because, if you're a fan of a band, or if you just happen to know a lot about a particular band, you really appreciate it when they get those details right. Yeah. Instead of saying, well, Freddie's the sexy one, so let's just make all of it Freddie's idea. And, here they very much went in the other direction, and they're like, let's try to make it clear, who did what, at least in some dialogue, and it worked. It was enough.
Yeah. And they, like the Beatles, you have John Lennon, who's they're all writers, but he's the writer. He's got sort of the melancholy side, and Paul McCartney's like sort of the pop good times guy. It's the same with Queen. Freddie has the melancholy side, and then you have, I'm in Love with My Car from the other guys, right, or Fat Bottom Girls from Brian May. Like it's a it's a perfect balance. And they had that one great exchange in the movie where, again, I have no idea how accurate it is, but Freddie goes off and does a solo thing, and he comes back and he says, I wanted to do my own thing. I told all of them exactly what I wanted them to do, and the problem was they did it. He missed that fight and that collaboration, which obviously, those are the things that bring the greatest movies and the greatest books and stories, like that collaboration. That's the stuff that gets it done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, they did a great, and I have no idea if the filmmakers were doing this on purpose, but there's that scene where Freddie is chastising the whole band about how, the reason they're all there is because of him. And he goes down to each one of them and says, you would be a dentist, to the drummer, and to Brian May, he says, you'd be some scientist writing some book that no one ever read. And I'm just like in my seat, like screaming to myself, like, no, Brian May is an all-time great guitarist.
Yeah.
And I wanted to slap the teeth out of Freddie Mercury's mouth when he said that. Like they accomplished their mission there if that's what they were going for. Brian May, the combination of Brian May's guitar sound, like his signature sound, and Freddie Mercury's voice, I mean, that is rock and roll legend right there. Just those two things put together.
Yeah, and we keep mentioning Brian May, the guitarist from Queen, but we should point out that Gwilym Lee, the actor who's cast as Brian May, it's eerie.
Yes,
how much he looks like Brian May.
It's Time Machine Brian May.
Yeah, but at the end of the movie, they do one of those things where they show you some actual archive footage of the band performing, and you get that one-to-one comparison of how the filmmakers just cast this film, and then the makeup artists and the costume designers just transform the cast into the band. It really is extraordinarily accurate. And that whole cast, they're super strong. We mentioned at the outset that Rami Malek is probably going to get a nomination for this, and he would totally deserve that. But the whole cast is strong. Like everybody delivers their part really, really perfectly. Yep. And there's not a clunker performance in the whole movie.
Right.
There's not a scene that you're ever taken out of the experience of the movie.
Yep.
It's
even down to the peripheral characters. The
Yes.
lawyer, Jim Beach.
Yes.
He was well cast, did a great job. I forget his last name, but Paul, the guy who sort of latched himself to Freddie Mercury and
yes.
basically caused, at least in the movie, in this version of the Queen story, caused a lot of the problems that happened with them. Did a great job. Freddie's longtime girlfriend / best friend Mary, I thought was really well cast, and they didn't spend enough time on sort of some of those outside characters and relationships to make the kind of movie that apparently I think a lot of critics seem to want to make. But I thought they did a pretty good job of capturing, Freddie's that thing that you hear about a lot of rock stars, where they're the most popular, the most famous person in the world, but they're so lonely.
Yeah.
And they did a great job with that with Freddie, to the point where, Freddie buys a house and he's got a room for each one of his cats. And next door, he's bought a house for Mary. A house for Mary,
yeah,
keeping her like a pet, just like he is with his cats.
Yeah.
And and to him, he doesn't know he's doing it, but these people that he's set up and his pets and all these people to him are just there sort of to serve him, even if he doesn't realize that's what he's doing. That massive ego starts to bloat, and he doesn't understand that the way it looks like to everyone else, he's just got them in his life for his service. And towards the end of the movie, he sort of tries to make amends for that, which I hope that happened in real life. I was asking you last night when we saw the movie if when he passed away, if he was on good terms with the band, and from all your knowledge, I know that's the case. So I was very happy to see that.
Yeah. And, this might be a good time to sort of address some of the criticism that the movie has received, for not delving in fully to his gay lifestyle, or, obviously him passing away from AIDS. And I think part of that is due to the fact that, Freddie Mercury is iconic. He's iconic as the frontman for Queen, but probably even more so is he's iconic within the gay community. Here was, a mega celebrity who, was somebody that very publicly went through, the sickness from HIV/AIDS, and then to die from it, in the middle of when that that virus was just killing massive numbers of gay men. And so I think that community, rightfully, holds on to him in, a very, very powerful way. And they wanted to see that maybe reflected more in the movie than you get.
Yeah.
Which, as we discussed, that's not the movie that the filmmakers wanted to make, but I totally understand where they came from with that. And so that criticism is fair. I mean, and it should be mentioned. I don't think it should ever be glossed over by, critics talking about that film. But it's just, that's not the film they chose to make.
Yeah.
And
they want to make a movie that was going to be popular and successful.
Yeah.
And you make movies like you do anything else in business to make money,
right?
To be successful.
Yes.
And while, like I said, there's a place for that other movie, this is the movie. Making movies, I'm sorry, it's not about truth telling. Yeah. It's about creating an entertaining product that appeals to the most amount of people.
Yes.
That's just the cold business side of what movie making is. Any business. That's any reason anyone's in for business. So you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be overlooked, and we're huge fans, so I would be lined up day one to see the other movie if they made that as well.
Yeah, especially if it starred Rami Malek.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, it'll never happen, I think, with the cast that they just did this movie with. But I mean, they got the Elton John biopic about to come out. Well, not really a biopic. It seems like it's sort of this weird take. Anyway, and I'm sure if this one is successful, we're going to see a bunch more of rock movies, biopics based on real characters, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe there'll be an appetite for it. I don't know, but it's not. They've obviously missed their chance to make that movie with Rami Malek and with that cast.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, they don't gloss all that stuff out. It's not absent from the movie.
Right.
It's just, it's not the dramatic focus of the story that they're trying to tell. And when you do get it, when you do get the taste of it, Rami Malek brings a gravitas to it.
Yeah.
So while it might not be a lot of screen time, it's still given the treatment that it deserves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess another thing, my one criticism, and this is not really a criticism of the movie, I was enjoying the movie so much, I wanted it to be louder. Like, we were sitting in that big theater,
right? Yes.
And we didn't see it on IMAX, but we saw it on something called, I guess, RPX, which is like, somewhere between IMAX and the standard screen. So you've got like the great sound and the great this and the great that, and it looks fantastic, digital presentation. But I wanted it to be louder. Like, I wanted to like stand up and look up at the projectionist and just be like, can you turn the music up a little bit? Like, the crowd we saw it with was really into the movie, especially right in front of us. There was a bunch of people that were really into it, and if you're going to see this in the theaters, which I encourage you to do, you should definitely do it as soon as possible while the theaters are still going to be pretty packed.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. If you can see this with a crowd, it's well worth it.
Yeah. I guess just selfishly, one of my minor disappointments was that they did not address the fact that Queen did the entire soundtrack for Flash Gordon, which is a great, I know it's a movie, it's a cheesy movie from the 80s, but the actual Flash theme from the Flash Gordon soundtrack has all the great elements of a Queen song. It's got the bombastic excitement and the driving guitars and drums, and it's got the melancholy, tickling at the piano kind of portion. I mean, that you can't separate that movie from the music, and it's Queen at its best. It's got all the the harmonized sound guitars with the Freddie Mercury voice, and it's just, man, to me, like when I listen to Queen, I mix that soundtrack in with the rest of the albums because it's got that quintessential sound.
So I have a question. This hit me literally in the middle of the night. Let me ask you this. How well do you remember the Flash Gordon movie? You're a big fan of it. Have you seen it fairly recently?
Last maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, let me ask you this. This is what I think they did. This is what my thought was. Let me try to get some confirmation for it. There's a moment in the film that they actually do two separate kind of time jump montages where you see the band doing a lot of touring, and you get the sense that okay, this is them, a year or two of hard grinding and, stepping up to the next level of stardom. The second one of those sort of montages comes with these graphics where you'll see the name of a city from all around the world, and it sort of swoops up toward the screen in a very 80s style.
Right.
Is that the graphic from the opening titles to Flash Gordon?
It's similar.
Okay.
I think it's in the ballpark, but I don't think that was intentional. I think that was just more of an 80s thing, not a Flash Gordon thing.
When I had that thought, I thought,
Yeah.
man, if they had done that, that would have been a deep cut.
It's similar enough, though, that the next time I watch Flash Gordon, I will definitely make sure I watch out for that. Yeah, so again...
Technically, what did you think of how they recreated the big concert scenes and captured the era of the time?
Well, I mean, if you look hard enough during the Wembley portion of the movie at the end, you can definitely see what they're doing with some of the, the cutting and pasting of the crowd movement and that sort of thing. But I mean, I really took off my technical hat for this movie. There's some things you can't help but notice.
Sure.
But we had noticed those in the trailers, I think.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of that, but I just was really taken aback at immediately watching the Live Aid performance afterwards, the actual Live Aid performance, and how they nailed it. So yeah, technically I thought it was fine. They didn't shoot it the same way. They shot it a completely different way for the movie. It wasn't like a shot for shot remake. But the attention to detail is incredible. If you haven't seen it in a long time, I definitely encourage you to go back and check it out as soon as possible before the movie starts fading from your memory. Did you have some specific thoughts about the technical aspect?
Well, so I feel like you do get a sense of how they may have been sort of butting their heads against the budget that they had to work with. A lot of it is fine, and they clearly shoot prior to the big climactic Live Aid performance. They shoot a lot of the concert footage or the concert performances in such a way that you don't really notice that they're doing it in a very cost-effective manner. Obviously, they were trying to save their money up for that big final moment, the big musical climax of the film, which was a good call. So for the most part, I didn't have a problem with it. It is what it is. It's all green screen. Like that's just how movies are made today, and so you get a lot of that with this film.
Yeah, I mean the types of problems that you would run into by doing that practically, even if they just got 20,000 people in the front and they matted the rest of it or whatever, it would still be there's a lot of technical issues with that, crowd control, and you got to make sure they're all hyped up, and you're going to have continuity issues and all that sort of thing. So I get it, but man, I'll give you an example of the attention to detail after watching the Live Aid performance last night. So for whatever reason, one of the first things I noticed when Freddie comes out and sits at the piano to start Bohemian Rhapsody at the Live Aid performance
is the cups.
The cups.
Yes, I had when I was watching the movie, I had that exact thought.
Yes. We watched the Live Aid, and I mean, it couldn't be more dead on. It's like the little Pepsi cups with the logos, and then like the cup that's like half full of beer, exactly set the same way. At least from my memory, I mean, they at least had the same amount of cups and around the same placement. Obviously, the wardrobe for all the band members was dead on exact. And the other thing that I thought was real interesting, and I think this goes to there's some subjectivity in what I'm going to say here, but I think there's a big difference between a caricature of a character and actually playing a character. Yeah. And I think Rami Malek did a great job of playing a character to the point where, you could see his film study in this. And the way I'm tying this together is, if you're a big rock and roll fan, there's a way the song sounds on the album, there's a way a song sounds live, and there's sort of a way that a frontman treats a song live, as far as, how much effort or notes that in the song he holds out, and in the live performance he might truncate it. So in that movie, in the Live Aid performance during the movie, there was a moment where the Bohemian Rhapsody song, towards the end of one of the lines, like Freddie, I'm going to leave you all behind and face the truth. And in the song, of course, the album version, leave you all behind and face the truth. It holds out, and he cuts it off. He truncates it. And watching the live in the movie and watching the Live Aid performance, he does that exact same thing, exact. So they even down to the improvisation, there was that much attention to detail. And after we watched the Live Aid show on YouTube, we just sort of went down the rabbit hole of watching a handful more Queen live performances on YouTube, and that was the thing that Freddie always did. He always truncated that line when they played it live. It's just kind of an interesting study in how much Rami Malek prepared for that movie and how accurate they wanted it to be, that it's a technical achievement, I think, that a lot of people won't notice and won't care about, and that's fine. It's not really, why you go to the movies to see, oh, this is exactly shot for
right.
shot. This is not shot for shot, but it's exactly how they did it at the Live Aid performance. But I just can't stress enough, if you watch it back to back, it's incredible how dead on it is. And I'm not even mentioning, the movements and the gesticulations that he makes, and the way he carries the microphone, and the way he prances around the stage, and the way that he holds that crowd in the palm of his hand. And I just have to go back to also, and this is more of a commentary on Queen than it is the movie, just the fact that for 25 straight minutes, 20 straight minutes, or whatever it was, 100,000 plus people from front to back, just as into it. You have that moment at the beginning of a rock show where everyone has all that energy, and then right. A couple songs in, people calm down a little bit. That whole stadium, the movie was not an exaggeration at all for the energy level. And when you watch the movie, I think there's things, when you see things happen in the crowd, like, fists going up and like sort of a wave going across the crowd, like, oh, that's kind of a weird like side effect of the special effect they're using. And then you watch the actual performance, and it's exactly what happens.
Yeah, wow.
It's almost sort of creepy the way a huge crowd of 100,000 people reacts from front to back, because they're hearing it. The people in the back are not hearing it at the same time. So you
Sure.
see these like pockets of the crowd reacting to something, and then a pocket behind them react to it. It's really cool. I encourage every single person out there who sees this movie, go home right afterwards, fire up YouTube, and find the full Live Aid performance in Wembley Stadium and watch it. It's just an incredible way. It's a great exclamation point on the end of seeing the movie.
That's such a great tip. To wrap this up, though, I want to also assure people who may not be fans of Queen at all, may not be familiar with Freddie Mercury at all, is this an enjoyable movie to see? And I would say it is. Yeah. I mean, if for no other reason, if you're just a movie fan, you get a great arc that you get to follow, and you get to watch Rami Malek play this role that could so easily have been a parody, because he's playing a character who is larger than life, and there is a lot of camp in his behavior and in the way he talks and acts.
Yep.
And Rami Malek does not do that at all. He plays this character, pardon the expression, but he plays him straight,
right.
And you get just a really nuanced and experienced performance from an actor who's relatively young and who's taking on a larger than life, real life persona. Yeah. And for that reason alone, even if you don't know anything about Queen and you don't have any interest in rock music or anything like that, it's definitely worth it to see his performance.
Right. And I want to bring up one other thing before we wrap up. Like, we concentrate a lot on the musical performances and sort of the movie after they got big, but the first scene where Freddie plays live with the band in the movie, the band that he joins, I think they were called Don't Forget to Smile or something.
Yes.
Terrible band name. Their lead singer quits. He joins the band. They show their first live performance together. And I just loved that scene so much, because no one had any idea what the hell to do with Freddie Mercury. Like, the bandmates are looking at him. The crowd's looking at him. No one has a clue. And of course, we're watching as fans of Queen, and obviously where the story goes. Like, wow, like, the world wasn't ready for Freddie Mercury,
right.
But Freddie Mercury was ready the second he hit the stage.
Yes.
Like, they did a good job of encapsulating how Freddie Mercury was out of the womb, ready to perform. Like, he was that guy his whole life. And from the second he stepped on stage, like, no one knew what the hell they were looking at.
Yes. Yeah. I think he has a line in there where he says, when he's on stage performing for people and, he's got their attention, that right. he's fearless. He knows who he is and where he belongs in that moment. And the film definitely, that's almost kind of the center through line of the entire film.
Yeah. And I think we've sort of established in previous standalone episodes about a movie, we give it a report card grade. I will give this an A-. The minus really only exists because I do think we need to allow for that criticism that was voiced to be there, even though, like I said, I think they're thinking of a kind of a different movie, but I do want to allow that. And I would have loved to see more character stuff, but again, I just think the movie was meant to be about the music, but I will allow for some of that criticism. And as far as like a movie going experience and just going to the theater, it's definitely an A++ for me. I mean, no doubt about it. But if I'm just judging the movie on its own merits, I'll go with an A-. I'll leave it at that because I just reserve my A++ for my all-time favorite movies.
Right.
So that's really the only reason I have not to give it an A+. But for enjoyment and I think rewatchability, like you mentioned, I actually wouldn't mind seeing that in the theater again, which is something that I very rarely. The last movie I saw in the theater more than once was Thor Ragnarok, and before that, I can't even remember the last time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. I would give it an A. Also, I think Rami Malek is a lock to get a Best Actor nomination for this film, because of the way Hollywood likes to work. This film doesn't go chasing the Best Picture sort of things that they like to see in movies. So.
Yeah, that other movie definitely would have been Oscar bait. The other movie that people wanted it to be, for sure.
And, we've already got one kind of musical performing movie, and that is A Star is Born. That's almost certainly a lock for Best Picture nomination. So because they have 10 slots to fill, there's a possibility that Bohemian Rhapsody could find a way to slip into the nomination process, but I don't think there's any possible contention that it could be a Best Picture film. Right. But it's definitely a strong film, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a more energetic and enjoyable film in 2018.
Go see it in the theater, and go see it soon before the crowds die down. Cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
All right. Well, there you go. A's from both of us. Definitely heartily recommend that movie to you guys. So we appreciate you guys tuning in once again to Technicolor Blood. You can hit us up on Twitter at TechBloodPod. And we will see you on the next one. Any parting thoughts, Terrence?
The show must go on.
The show must go on. Yes. Great moment from that movie. And another great Queen song. All right, guys. We'll talk to you on the next one.